blasting patients with too much radiation. To the naked eye, the Therac 25 looked like any other hospital machine. It was used to provide radiation treatment to cancer patients, but hidden inside its code was a tiny mistake that transformed this machine from a lifesaver to a silent killer. To make matters worse, the flaw was so small that for years, no one even realized it was there. It wasn't until bodies started piling up that investigators began putting the pieces together. But while some tried to reveal the truth, others did everything to keep the machine running, leading to the loss of more and more lives.
If you're watching this wondering why nobody shut it down, don't just look at the patient on the table. Look at how many people depended on that machine staying useful and profitable.
It was June 3rd, 1985, and something terrible was about to happen at the Kennestone Oncology Center in Georgia. That day, 61-year-old Katie Yarborough was receiving radiation treatment for cancer. This wasn't her first session, so she knew what to expect. Katie was being treated with a machine called the Therac 25. Patients would lie down on a treatment table, and the machine would release just enough radiation to destroy cancer cells without harming healthy tissue.
Yo, when y'all hear radiation, don't it just sound dangerous? I'm not gonna lie, my brain says danger. How is this supposed to hit cancer without frying the whole body? Radiation works by ripping apart fast-growing cells at the DNA level, and cancer grows faster than anything else. The problem is, too much radiation doesn't stop at cancer. It shreds healthy tissue the same way.
The hospital staff would be in another room using a computer to control how much radiation was used. As soon as the machine was turned on, Katie felt a tremendous force of heat in her body. To give you an idea, she was exposed to between 10,000 and 20,000 rad, similar to what happens during a nuclear disaster, not a regular medical protocol.
Oh boy, a nuclear disaster. I'll never forget how radiation literally cooks tissue from the inside out. So 10 to 20,000 rad isn't treatment. It's exposure that burns muscle, destroys nerves, and leaves the body failing while the person's still awake.
After the session was over, Katie accused the technician of burning her during the procedure. But instead of taking Katie seriously, the hospital staff acted like she was making stuff up. In the days that followed, Katie noticed that the area where she was treated became red, and she was also experiencing other health issues. Within 2 weeks, she was rushed to the emergency room where doctors tried to save her. The staff at the treatment center refused to believe the Therac 25 could malfunction, so they assumed Katie's sudden health problems were symptoms of her illness.
Wouldn't you guys agree with me? It feels obvious something clearly went wrong, but I guess back then, one person speaking up versus a perfect machine didn't even feel like a debate to them. And that's when it hits. Once everybody starts trusting the machine, they stop trusting the person right in front of them. It becomes easier to blame her than question the thing they rely on every day.
In the 1980s, the Therac 25 was one of the most popular machines for treating cancer. It was a radiation therapy machine that could be controlled by a computer. It was so impressive, the doctors were calling it a state-of-the-art medical wonder. However, buried inside the machine's code was a bug that went undetected by everyone. The Therac 25 software had a coding error called a race condition.
What you need to understand watching this is that most machines back then had a real physical stop if something went wrong. This one didn't. It trusted the computer completely, even when the computer was making a deadly mistake.
A race condition occurs when a device attempts to perform 2 or more operations or tasks at the same time. The race condition in the Therac 25 caused the machine to glitch, releasing radiation doses that were hundreds of times greater than normal. The computer was supposed to keep track of the machine and shut things down if it detected a dangerous situation, but without built-in safety interlocks, the machine would go crazy if the software had a bug.
One bad moment was enough to fire a lethal dose with no pushback. That's what should bother you. The computer slipped, the machine followed, and nobody realized it was killing someone. And the scariest part is, it didn't scream or spark. It failed quietly like nothing was wrong at all.
As bad as that sounds, the Therac 25 had even more problems. The machine software was written by a programmer who didn't have much experience. The code had very few comments, and there was no sign that proper tests had been done. Fixing the code wasn't going to be easy either, because the mysterious programmer who wrote the messy code no longer worked for the company and could not be found. However, those using the machine had no clue about these issues. Instead, they were trained to believe that the machine had many safety mechanisms that would make it virtually impossible to overdose the patients.
From where you're standing, it feels obvious. This should have been caught, but the real danger was buried in code only engineers could read, and even they didn't fully grasp what they've created. That's the irony.
By 1983, 5 Therac 25s were installed in the United States and 6 in Canada, and for 2 years and thousands of patients, they worked perfectly. Then suddenly, in 1985, the machines started malfunctioning and blasting patients with too much radiation. But everyone trusted the medical device so much that they didn't realize the danger was hiding in plain sight.
Think about it from your side. When something works every single day for years, you stop checking it. Like your car. If it starts every morning, you're not popping the hood until a day it suddenly don't. You gotta sit with how wild this sounds. The machine looked calm, followed orders, but underneath it was acting on its own. Like it didn't know the difference between treatment and harm.
It was June 26, 1985 at the Ontario Cancer Foundation, Canada. 40-year-old Frances Hill was being treated with a Therac 25. It wasn't going to end well. The machine blasted Frances with too much radiation. Her injuries were so bad she needed a complete hip replacement, but she never got the opportunity to do that. Just 4 months later, Frances passed away.
This is the truth most people miss. A hip replacement couldn't fix what radiation had already destroyed inside her body. By the time doctors realized what happened, the damage wasn't spreading, it was already done.
To get to the bottom of this, the hospital staff contacted ACL Medical, the company that manufactured the device. When ACL executives heard about this second problem, they were worried. The company made millions from selling and maintaining Therac 25 machines for hospitals. They didn't want to lose their moneymaker, so they sent out one of their best service engineers to the hospital to investigate.
You ever stop and wonder how much money had to be tied up in this thing? Cause ain't no way people fought this hard to keep it running for free. And you're right to wonder that. Each Therac 25 brought in millions through sales, servicing, and long-term hospital contracts. So shutting it down meant admitting those profits were built on something dangerous.
This is one of the most upsetting parts of the story. After the second incident, ACL knew that there might be something wrong with their machine, but they didn't pull the machines from use or warn the other hospitals to be careful. The machines remained in operation. Instead, they just sent a service engineer and waited for his report. Meanwhile, people in other hospitals were still using the machine, risking their lives.
You start seeing how this gets bigger than the machine itself. Once whole paychecks, careers, and reputations lean on one product, stopping it don't feel like safety anymore. It feels like pulling the plug on everything built around it.
So what did the engineer discover when he looked into the Therac 25? Did he find the killer code? ACL's engineer arrived at the facility and ran multiple tests on the machine. However, it seemed like the long trip was just a waste of time because everything was working perfectly. He carefully ran test after test, but each time the Therac 25 behaved as expected. Since he couldn't pinpoint the problem, he decided to guess what could possibly cause the machine to malfunction.
No lie, we're in 2026 and software still messes up. So imagine in the 80s betting their lives on it. It feels like they rushed something powerful before it was really ready. From your side, it's easy to call it reckless, but inside companies like this, speed was the product. Hospitals wanted faster treatments, investors wanted results, and the people who paid for the speed were the patients, whose bodies couldn't survive the mistakes.
He figured the only way such an overdose could happen was if some parts inside the machine were in the wrong position. For example, if the scanning magnets or X-ray target weren't lined up correctly, the patient could be hit with a strong beam of radiation. However, ACL didn't tell other hospitals that 2 patients had already been injured. They just made it seem like they were upgrading the machine. ACL Medical breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that they had solved the problem. Barely a month after they upgraded all Therac 25s, another accident occurred.
When a company patches something this deadly in the shadows, the danger multiplies. Now it's hidden harm, not just a broken machine. And no matter how quiet they keep it, the truth charges interest. Pay it early or pay it later in bodies.
Fritz contacted the machine's manufacturer, ACL Medical, but this time they lied. ACL insisted that the Therac 25 couldn't deliver an overdose and that no other accidents had occurred previously, which was obviously completely false. ACL tried to shift the blame, suggesting that the hospital might have an electrical problem that messed up Ray's treatment.
Be real for a second. When a company swears it can't happen, that's how people get hurt. And blaming the hospital's electric problem feels like pointing anywhere except the machine. Dog, can you even imagine, bruh? If every hospital knew this thing could overdose, that's a PR nightmare. refunds, lawsuits, cancellations. The whole brand would be cooked overnight.
3 weeks later, another patient passed away. Fritz Hager was furious. As the hospital's staff physicist, he felt responsible for the 2 lives lost on his watch. Fritz couldn't stop thinking about the Therac 25. He was obsessed with figuring out why it was hurting patients. He had only one lead. In both cases, when the accidents occurred, the machine displayed a Malfunction 54 message. But Malfunction 54 was not mentioned in the Therac 25 manual.
The manual tells you how it's supposed to work on a normal day. It doesn't map out every rare breakdown a complex machine can still hit. And when that breakdown involves radiation, the consequences are catastrophic.
To trigger the overdose, you needed to type quickly, the kind of speed that an experienced operator might have. In the case of the Therac 25, the race condition was triggered by the operator adjusting the machine's settings rapidly, causing it to deliver a full power electron beam when it should have delivered a low dose X-ray beam. That's when he reported his findings to AECL Medical.
When the same machine keeps getting called in about, and every time the answer is another excuse, that tells you plenty. Instead of stopping it too early to fix the problem, they kept doing enough just to keep it running, even as complaints stacked up. From their angle, it probably sounded simple. Don't rush the inputs, problem solved. But you and I both know, if topping at normal speed can flip a machine into overdose mode, that ain't a user problem.
He explained how the machine delivered a dangerous dose of radiation even though the software indicated that the treatment was normal. AECL was reluctant to accept this theory. They were convinced the malfunction was due to operator error. It took several phone calls before AECL was able to replicate the same error on their lab machine. The Therac 25 had a coding error. This meant everything that happened so far was all their fault.
Truth be told, the lesson came after the damage. Even though this didn't have to play out that way, what failed wasn't awareness, it was how long it took to respond.
And when the news got out, all hell broke loose. AECL was hit with lawsuits from the victims' families. They wanted compensation, but more than that, they wanted justice. The lawsuits were settled out of court. They settled quietly to avoid the bad press and damage to the company's reputation. The company was in shambles, and in 1988, AEC Medical shut down.
That's the irony right there. They kept pushing this thing so it wouldn't fall apart. And that's exactly what sent it downhill. Sometimes you fight so hard to keep something alive, you don't realize you're the one letting it run itself into the ground. By the time the lawsuits hit, the doors were closed. The outcome they were trying to avoid had already arrived. In the end, refusing to stop became the very thing that ensured everything stopped anyway.
The Therac 25 disaster will go down as one of the worst software bugs in history.